We're back here, whole 9 yards on a Thursday afternoon. Drew Pien here with Brandon Krikorian. Brandon?
So, yeah.
So the first thing you're going to notice on this podcast is the cameras look different, and that is true. I am in a new spot. Obviously, right now you can only see me, and now you can only see Brandon. We're just trying some new things here. Ideally, in a perfect world, this kind of switches between who's talking, all that type of stuff. If you've seen podcasts before, we're trying to basically just, switch things up, see what works for us. The second thing you're going to notice is me and Brandon have the same exact shirt on. Not planned at all.
Yeah, definitely not planned.
So we'll try with the switching between all this stuff. But yeah, I mean, what'd you think of the Dak Prescott contract?
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna start with Dak. Our last episode was all NBA. This one's gonna be all NFL with the franchise tag deadline, roster cuts, free agents, and pending free agents. So we're definitely gonna start with Dak. Me being the Cowboy fan. Well, first the contract. I mean, it's a 4-year contract, $160 million, $126 million guaranteed. It's basically $40 million for the first 3 years, and then the last year I think was $32 million. I want to say, and in the first year alone, he's gonna make $75 million guaranteed in the first season alone, which is, I think that's the most money any quarterback has ever gotten in NFL history for one season. I think Russell Wilson had the most, I think when he signed his last contract. But yeah, it's a huge contract. I mean, I wasn't afraid that they weren't going to get a contract done. I don't think any Cowboy fan should have been. If he were to not get a contract signed, though, and it would have been on the franchise tag, then I would probably say he'd be gone after next year. But that didn't happen. They signed the contract, which I'm happy about. I think Dak's a top 10 quarterback in the league. Is he, he's paid as the number 2 quarterback in the league right now based off his contract. Is he that? No. But is he a top 10 player? I would say yes. And he can definitely improve. I mean, he's only 27 years old. I mean, he's coming off the injury, but it's a broken leg. It's not like a nerve issue or an arm issue or something like that. And he's already on the field practicing, and it only happened, 4 months ago. So that's good news. And I think, did they overpay? I think it's the real question. I would say yes, but that's just the quarterback market. If, you can't, I just don't see how they could have paid him $35 million or $33 million a year. I think the number had to be 40, so that's what they had to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, that's just how the market works for all basically top-tier free agents of any position. I mean, when the Patriots signed Stephon Gilmore, they basically gave him top corner money. He definitely wasn't a top cornerback quality player then. I mean, he emerged into one. But, yeah, I mean, if you look at, Stafford contracts, basically any top 15 quarterback, I mean, that's just how the market works. So it's going to be Prescott's number 2. A couple years down the line, he's going to end up being down to 5 and 6, and by the end of that contract, he'll probably be the 8th or 9th, around that highest paid quarterback in the league. And yeah, that's just kind of how it works. If you're Jerry Jones, would you have signed this? I mean, he did. Would you have?
Yeah, because what else were you going to do? Because let's say you franchise Dak for this year, you have to know that he's not going to be coming back the next year. So I would assume that with Dak at your quarterback for this upcoming season, you'd be at least 500. So you're not going to have a top pick in the draft. So would you take a quarterback at 15 to 20? Or if you made the playoffs past 20, would you even take a quarterback? I mean, you'd almost have to, but then you have to look at free agent options, maybe a trade with someone. So it would get to a situation that you probably would rather just have Dak than look for a rookie QB, a veteran for a 1-year deal, kind of a bridge quarterback. So I'd so much rather have Dak than any player like that. So I think they had to sign this contract. I wish it was done 2 years ago instead of now. I wish they signed him instead of Zeke, because if they'd signed Dak 2 years ago instead of Zeke probably wouldn't even be on this team, honestly, because they wouldn't pay him top money because he'd break down like he has the last 2 years. And he wouldn't, and the running back market, except for Derrick Henry, there's really no big number out there other than Henry. So would Zeke even be on this team if they'd signed Dak 2 years ago instead of Zeke? I don't even think he would. And I think that would have been the right decision if they would have done it then. But they had to wait, so they definitely hurt themselves by waiting. But at least they got it done, so that's really what I'm happy about.
Yeah, what was Jerry Jones thinking in not signing Dak basically as early as possible? If you knew for the most part you were going to sign him regardless, I don't know why you would wait. The quarterback market would never go down,
Yeah,
in terms of like average annual, money. If it was, COVID would be like the one thing that would make it go down, and it didn't.
yeah.
So to me, Jerry Jones made a huge mistake with that, and it's probably in my opinion, is probably gonna cost them, if not a chance at the Super Bowl itself, a Super Bowl victory, because obviously overpaying Zeke to start with, probably, and the fact that he's not even probably won't even be a top 10 running back next year, if I had to guess. I don't think he will. Maybe he will. Who knows? It's not an outrageous take to have. If you had that money and you were able to spend it on a player on the defense, or maybe something on the offense as well, I mean, your team would be so much better off. Which is why, I mean, I just don't like paying running backs in general, and I especially don't like bad running back contracts. So to me, huge mistake, huge mistake, because when you pay your quarterback 40 mil, you basically can't afford to have more than one or two bad contracts on a team, especially, big contracts that are also bad. I mean, just look at the past Super Bowl winners. I mean, out of those past Super Bowl winners, was their quarterback paid a lot, and two, if so, try to find the bad contracts on that team. I mean, look at the Patriots Super Bowls too. I mean, even though Brady wasn't the highest paid quarterback, he was still getting paid a solid sum of money. I mean, he's still more than a lot more than a rookie contract. 2014 team, try to find me bad contracts. The Falcons team, the one Super Bowl 51, try to find me some bad contracts on that Pats team. Even the Patriots and Rams Super Bowl 53, try to find me some bad contracts. The Chiefs in what was that, 54, right?
54, yeah.
Try to find me some bad contracts on that Chiefs team. There's not many at all. So I think we're gonna see that, spending all that money on Dak and then not being able to spend it elsewhere is gonna hurt, especially considering Zeke is getting paid so much.
And we are seeing that huge quarterback contracts can affect the rest of your team, and we'll get into it later in the episode. But with the Chiefs, I mean, they paid Mahomes $500 million, and they had to cut two of their starting tackles today. So, those contracts can come in even for the best teams, where the Cowboys aren't at the level the Chiefs are, clearly. So for them to sign this contract now, they really need to. I mean, really in the next 2 years, because the first year of his contract, the cap hit's only $22 million, which is pretty crazy considering he's getting $75 million in the first year. So for it to only be a $22 million cap hit is pretty good. But they're not just paying Dak, they're paying Zeke, they're paying Amari, they're paying DeMarcus Lawrence, they're paying Jalen Smith, Lyle Collins, Tyron Smith. They're paying a lot of guys a lot of money, and they did restructure a couple contracts to free up, I think it was almost $19 million in cap for this season, which is pretty impressive considering how many contracts they do have. But, over in the next 2 years, these contracts are going to start coming in a lot more than they are right now. And it doesn't seem like the Cowboys are going to get to a Super Bowl. I mean, that's me saying that. I would be surprised if they do, unless Dak plays like MVP level and our defense just improves. But I can't worry about the contract now because it was the right move to do. But over the length of the contract, I'm going to worry because we're most likely not going to reach a Super Bowl, if anything, even win a Super Bowl. So I can't be upset at the contract, but I just know it's most likely not going to work out in the long run.
You got to start hitting in the draft. I mean, that's just the reality of it. You got to hit on your firsts. You got to hit on your thirds. You got to hit on some of your sixths. That's just the reality of it. If you don't do that, you're not going to compete. I mean, because when you pay a quarterback $40 million, regardless of even having bad contracts with Zeke, maybe Tyron Smith, if you consider that a bad contract. I mean, I don't know, whatever, but you got to start hitting on these picks. And if this draft is going to have to be the start of it, right? I mean, when are they picking?
We have the 10th pick.
I mean, they got to hit on that 10th pick.
The guy I want is Patrick Surtain, the corner from Alabama. I mean, if anything, they're going defense, unless they were saying maybe if Kyle Pitts, the tight end from Florida, drops, they may go with him, which, I mean, you can't be mad at that pick. It's like last year's pick was CD. It's like, that's a guy who shouldn't be there at your number, but he's there, so you almost have to take him. But if they didn't take defense last year, they almost have to take defense this year, and probably their first 3 picks have to be defense, honestly. But you're right, they had to start hitting on their draft picks, and we got a couple compensatory picks. I think we got a 3rd round, a 4th round, and a 6th round, so those picks help. But you need to hit at least 3 of your draft picks to be like starters and then plus starters, if anything. But at least starters. You need starters from your draft picks, and at least 3 or 4 of your picks have to be starters.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens on that. As far as people that were tagged in free agency, I mean, the Bucks tagged Godwin. My perspective, I mean, I like the move. I think keeping the number one priority was being able to retain Godwin, David, and Barrett.
And they did sign David back.
You got David. I think it's a solid contract, at least for the short term. Again, I mean, when you have Brady and you're the Buccaneers, especially a small market, kind of basically the worst team in all the major sports in terms of winning percentage, at least before this year. When you get Brady, who's 42 years old, you need to go all in. I think this contract, even if it ends up being bad after a couple years, it's still worth it. I mean, and the same's going to be if they sign Godwin or Barrett, it's going to be the same principle for them. I mean, the Broncos basically did that with Peyton Manning too, is they kind of went all out and they kind of accepted the fact that, you know what, after 2 or 3 years, we're going to be garbage. And whether or not you think the Broncos are in a good place, it probably was the best move for them, at least, in general, going all in. Maybe you can pick some holes in some of their contracts, but going all in is what I think the Bucs should 100% do with Brady, and tagging Godwin, signing David. I think they're going to sign Barrett as well, probably 4 years 65, 4 years 70. But yeah, I mean, I think keeping Godwin's a good move. I know people didn't think it was necessary just because you've got so many players, and even the players that didn't see the field, like Scotty Miller is good. I mean, who was it? Tyler Johnson, Deontay Johnson.
Tyler Johnson. Yeah.
Tyler Johnson. I mean, even he in the regular season made a lot of impressive catches. He made one, I think it was the NFC Championship game as well. He had a very impressive catch.
Yeah.
There's obviously the rumors about OBJ getting traded to Tampa Bay. Personally, people have said they're a fan of it. I don't understand the want or need. There just isn't a need. I mean, I know, this year of the Bucs was kind of representative of why you can't have too many weapons, but there's boundaries as to, it's not going to fit. And even if it would work out, you still have to give up some draft capital for Odell, probably a first or a second. And there's still the chance that when you have AB, Mike Evans, Odell Beckham, and all these other receivers, there's so much volatility there. I just don't think it's worth it. But as far as Godwin being tagged, I love the move.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone expected him not to be tagged. And we'll see if they get a long-term contract with him. Obviously, they still have to pay Barrett. So do they just keep the franchise on Godwin and try to go for Barrett and then work, just figure it out next year? I guess that's something they're going to have to figure out. But there's no doubt that there was no doubt that he wasn't going to come back. And Barrett, I would assume the same, unless someone just really outbids them, which is possible. I mean, he's had 2 straight years of being a top defensive end, so it's definitely possible. But they're in a good situation. Again, they're going to ride Brady out until he's done. So that whether that's after next year, after the year after that, they're going all in, kind of like Peyton Manning and the Broncos. So, yeah, you have to keep all the players that you can. All right, and the next player who got tagged is Justin Simmons from the Broncos. He's a safety. He's a pretty good safety. He's probably definitely top 10 safety. I don't know where he'd rank, actually in that top 10, but maybe even top 5, honestly. He's very productive. The Broncos just haven't been good, so not many people really know about him. Kind of the same thing with Godwin. They didn't expect him to leave. It was more just like, let's franchise him to work out a contract until I think it's July 15th the deadline is. So, yeah, again, not many people know about him, but I don't think anyone thought he was actually going to leave the Broncos.
Yeah, I 100% expect Simmons they'll probably get a deal done. If not, I'd assume they'll get a deal done next year, if not this year.
Yeah.
So I don't see Simmons leaving the Broncos anytime soon, really.
Yeah, and we'll have to see if he gets paid top safety money. I mean, like, to be the top safety. I know it's Budda Baker right now, but I wonder if he'll get, because like the market works. Usually the next guy gets paid more, but I don't know. But other than Justin Simmons, though, Allen Robinson also got tagged by the Bears, which I don't think he really wanted to get tagged by the Bears. I think he's just done with
Definitely
Chicago.
not.
Yeah. But he's probably, even though he got franchise tagged, which means he technically has to come back, he's rather just going to sit out, or he's just going to just get traded. He's just going to be full denial and just want to get traded, which I don't really blame him. I mean, they've had no quarterback. They really still don't have a plan at quarterback for this season and the future. So why would he want to be there when he could be somewhere else? And he's clearly a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. So
They need a quarterback, and he needs 100%. He's not taking any hometown discounts, and they need to get a quarterback for him to probably stay.
No, definitely. And if they could get like a Watson, maybe a Wilson, like he maybe would stay, but the odds of that even happening are slim. So he's probably not even going to be in Chicago. Probably sometime in the summer he'll be traded or something like that.
I mean, where do you think's the best fit for Robinson? Personally, I think New England is a good fit. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, any team that needs a receiver. I definitely think New England's a good fit. I don't know if I would assume Robinson wants to go to somewhere with a good quarterback. I don't know if he has any say in that, really. To be honest, I'm not too sure if he does or not. I mean, I guess whatever team gives him the most money, but.
Yeah, I would expect him to be with a good quarterback only because he came from Jacksonville, then went to Chicago, and he's never had a good quarterback in his whole career. So I'd assume he'd rather just play with a good quarterback, even if it's – I mean, you'd assume if you're going to a team with a good quarterback, they're most likely a good team. But, if New England, if they figured out their quarterback situation, maybe he'd want to go there. But I think it just depends on what quarterback he wants to play with.
Other tags, Leonard Williams.
Yeah.
I mean, all right.
Yeah, I mean, well, one, if you look at that trade that the Giants made with the Jets, they traded, I forget exactly what the pick was. Maybe it was a third-round pick. Might have been.
I think it was.
Yeah, I think it was a third-round pick for Leonard Williams. And again, when Leonard Williams was with the Jets, I think he was the number 5 overall pick.
Sixth. He was
sixth overall. Yeah, sixth overall. He just could never get to the quarterback, at least sack the quarterback. And that was always his problem with the Jets. Then he gets traded to the Giants, and all of a sudden he can actually get to the quarterback more. So I don't know why, but he just can. So that was a great trade. It worked out if he can continue to play like that. I'd assume they'd sign him to a long-term contract. It's hard to trade someone for a third-round pick like that and then not sign him to a long-term contract, especially when
it was a third last year and a fifth this year.
Yeah. So I'd be surprised if they don't sign him to a long-term extension. But yeah, if you look at that trade, that was just a great trade that they made, especially at the time when most people thought that was a bad trade to make.
I assume if you're trading those picks for the 6th overall pick, this is basically the dream scenario. That's why they made the trade. They assumed he's in a horrible situation, basically similar to Darnold. Darnold's being the 3rd pick, Leonard being the 6th. Obviously, they play in different positions, but it's basically just the situation they were betting on the situation being bad and not the actual player itself. It worked out because, if the Jets had gotten what Leonard would produce last year, they obviously wouldn't have traded him for a 3rd and a 5th, and they would have been happy with picking him 6th. At least content with it.
It's basically like getting a 6th overall pick in the draft. That's basically what it was. So yeah, if he can continue to play like this, then that was a really good trade, and we'll have to see what the contract looks like. But you'd assume it's not top money, but it's good enough money to the point where you'd expect him to at least play to the expectation of the contract. But next up, speaking of the Jets, Marcus May got franchise tagged, and I know I saw his agent on Twitter talking about how the Jets are cheap and that they didn't want to pay Marcus May. I don't know what you think about Marcus May as a player, but he's definitely good. He's not great as a safety, but I don't exactly know what that situation's going to turn out to. It seems almost as if his agent doesn't really want him to even be on the Jets, but I just don't know exactly. I don't think he has the stature of a player who can kind of sit out or even want to get traded. So I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen there.
Yeah, in Marcus May's career year, he was basically a fringe Pro Bowl player.
Yeah.
And he's going to be 28. Am I going to sign him to anything longer than a 2-year deal? Probably not. I just don't feel like – because if I signed Marcus May to a 4-year deal, at probably best 2 of those are good years. I wouldn't expect to get more than 2 good years out of May on that contract. And even then, it's still a gamble. Is he even going to be good? He might be a guy that you sign to a 4-year deal, and after 1 year he's cut, like similar to basically like Van Noy. I mean, it might be a situation like that where he just gets signed a year later, he's released. So I think the tag is all right. I mean, I guess you might as well use the tag. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the move. I am not a big fan of May as a player. But at the same time, the Jets have no talent basically, and you need to have at least, you'd like to have something. So if you're not going to do anything better with the money, which maybe maybe you wouldn't have done anything better with the money. I think it's fine. Not being tied up to something long term, whether it be May or somebody else in free agency, I think is a benefit. But I mean, we'll see what happens, after the tag. Yeah.
Yeah. And then probably the last biggest name who got tagged was Brandon Scherf of the Washington football team. He's been a top guard really since he came into the league, but he's been like really good over the last couple years. He got tagged, so I mean, not much to say. He's a guard who most people probably really don't even know of, but I'd assume they'd probably sign him to a long-term extension.
Yeah, I would definitely expect that. People not tagged. I mean, I think the biggest name that wasn't tagged was definitely Aaron Jones. I feel pretty confident in saying and I do like the call of not tagging Aaron Jones. I know people are saying.
I do too.
Yeah. I know people are saying, wow, I mean, you're not surrounding Aaron Rodgers with anything, but Aaron Jones is like, I mean, what is he? Like a top 10 running back? He's not special, at least in my mind. I mean, I think Dillon, AJ Dillon?
AJ
Dillon, the second round pick from BC, I mean, he showed promise, and even if he's okay, even if he's only okay, it's not hard to find like solid running backs at all, and I don't really enjoy paying running backs at all, and I don't think Zeke and I guess McCaffrey to a certain extent, and all these other running backs, they haven't helped Cook's cause or Aaron Jones's cause at all. I don't think he's that good. I mean, I'd rather spend the money elsewhere, and even then, they're kind of up against the cap. That might even be over the cap by a few million.
They're definitely. I'm not sure if they're over, but they're definitely close to it.
They're close, and I don't think Jones is that good, and it would be unfortunate if you sign him to a 4-year deal and you get like 1 or 2 good years out of it, which is probably what you would get at most, to be honest. I just don't like Aaron Jones that much, and I mean, Rodgers has enough on the offensive side, right? I don't think to win a Super Bowl, I don't think you need anything more than that. If Rodgers is as good as people say he is, at least in my mind. But
yeah, and he's like Aaron Jones. I would say he's definitely a top 10 running back, but the money he would be asking for is going to be top 5 running back money, which I don't think he is. And honestly, if he was on a worse team, he probably wouldn't even be as good as he was. He definitely was benefited from having Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers and a pretty good offensive line. I
don't know where you'd have Joe Mixon, but I think Joe Mixon's a better running back than Aaron Jones.
I mean, I guess when he's healthy, he's probably very similar to him. And he's had way less to work with than Aaron Jones has, so that's probably a pretty similar case. And yeah, I think the Packers just saw the other running backs who got paid, like Zeke and McCaffrey. I know McCaffrey got injured, but that can happen with a running back way more easily than any other position. So I think they made the right decision in not tagging him. And there was something that they may have wanted to sign him to a long-term extension. I don't think they should. I just don't, especially when you have Dillon. You can always find a running back that you can replace like a top running back with in most cases, and you have more problems on your defense with I think they have. It seems like they have like $10 million in cap room, so not much, but you can at least make some subtle additions on your defense, which they need help with. So I think it's the right move by not tagging Aaron Jones.
I did hear people talking about, he might come back on a deal. The only way he would is if he goes, tests the market, and sees that nobody really wants him that much and that he was expecting to get paid more than he actually is worth. If I'm the Packers, I'm not even paying him top 10 running back money. If I'm going to sign Jones to a long-term deal, I'll give him 4 years, but I'll make him the 15th highest paid.
Yeah, and he probably wouldn't even accept that. But
sorry. Thanks.
He probably wouldn't even accept that. But if there's nothing else on the market, which I mean, I'd be surprised. I feel like someone's going to overpay for him. It seems like that always happens. I was hearing maybe the Dolphins might sign him, which they have a lot of money and they do need a running back, so that probably would fit. But if there's really no money out there, he might just come back for less money, maybe a 1-year deal or something like that. So We'll have to see, but I'm pretty sure someone's going to overpay for him. It just always seems like someone does that.
If there's a year where people aren't going to overpay for a running back, it's probably going to be this year. I mean, obviously with COVID, and then also, I mean, we've just seen, other than basically Derrick Henry, we haven't seen a running back contract work out. I don't think, at least as of recently. Uh, I mean, Jones would have to play really well for a long time if you sign him to a long-term deal for me to be like, I'm happy I signed this. And I just don't think that's likely at all. And even if it is, it's like I just view running back as such a dime a dozen position, if not the most dime a dozen position in the league.
Yeah.
So I just don't. I mean, the floor of running backs is just so high that it's like there's not much of a, I mean, if you have a bad left tackle, you have a bad left tackle. If you have a bad running back, I mean,
They can always have like a good game or a couple good games,
Yeah.
So running backs are the most replaceable position in all of football.
if not all of sports. I mean, maybe, I don't know, but yeah, I mean, other people not tagged. I mean, obviously Barrett wasn't tagged. I mean, it's not really noteworthy because he used it on Godwin. I don't know if I was a little bit surprised. I wouldn't have been surprised if they did tag Barrett. I'm not sure. Maybe that's just because they're more confident they'll get something done with Barrett than Godwin. Godwin definitely wants to be paid, so maybe they end up having to maybe he just plays on the tag this year. I'm not too sure what's gonna happen. But he said he wants to be paid. But Godwin does want to be back. But again, he does want to be paid. I think Barrett's gonna be the same way. But I'm assuming that move is because they're more confident that they can get Barrett back on a long-term deal rather than Godwin, so they tagged Godwin. I'm fine with it. I mean, you used it. Galladay didn't get tagged as well. I mean,
Yeah. Well, one thing I was gonna say is that Barrett, he did play under the tag last season, so and they also had to tag Godwin, so there was less likely that they were going to tag Barrett. But yeah, Galladay, he didn't get tagged, which is somewhat surprising because Marvin Jones is a free agent. You really only have Kenny Galladay if you don't have Marvin Jones on that team. So for them not to tag him, I think it just shows that they're really just going for a rebuild and just letting him go instead of paying him big wide receiver money for a team that's going to go nowhere over the course of that contract. So I guess that's the reason why they did that. I mean, he's clearly when he's healthy, he's probably maybe top 12 wide receiver, maybe top 10. You have to look at the list. Probably top 10, honestly. So whatever team gets him, there's going to be a lot of suitors for him. I don't know how much they're going to have to pay for him, but I would say he's going to work out in that contract, whoever pays him.
I would assume so. I mean, he's getting, I guess, technically getting up there in age, although, I mean, not really. But, yeah, I would say he's probably around the 10th best receiver if he's playing up to his peak. I'm not paying him top 5 receiver money, though. I'm just not. I mean, it's just, I would be scared if I paid him top 5 receiver money on a big contract, and that latter half of that contract probably not going to be great for me. I think they're a better wide receiver. I mean, I guess Allen since he's tagged, but I mean, I would rather have Allen than Galladay. I mean, I guess it depends on how much you'd have to give up for Robinson, but yeah.
Yeah, I think I would rather have Allen Robinson than Kenny Galladay, but I think the ceiling is a lot higher for Galladay because if you look at his build and his speed, he can catch almost every single ball, which I know Allen Robinson's good at a lot of that stuff too, but I think if you're looking at the ceilings of both of them, Galladay is definitely higher, but I think you'd have to wonder when can he actually reach that ceiling if he ever does. So I would say the safer bet is Robinson, but you're right. I mean, he's tagged, so you'll have to trade for him if anything. So is it worth giving up whatever it is to get Robinson, or would you rather just sign Galladay for, I mean, you'd hope it wouldn't be top 5 wide receiver money, but yeah, I guess you just have to see what he wants and what you could work out. But I guess it's really down to, are you willing to give up pieces or are you willing to give up money? And I guess a team would have to decide which one that would be.
Patriots better get something, though. If the Patriots enter, I mean, this is just, me, but if the Patriots enter training camp with no wide receivers, and they're probably going to trade N'Keal Harry, which I think is good because he's just bad. He's a bust. At least if it stayed in New England, he would be. Maybe he gets better somewhere else. I doubt it, though. If you can I'd take it. I mean, probably get like a 5th for him. But if the Patriots don't get anybody, I will be so disappointed because even a great quarterback in that situation, like we saw with Brady, you just don't get anywhere with it. I mean, you're just not going to win with that little weapons. So especially if you end up bringing Cam Newton back, or if you bring Ryan Fitzpatrick in. I mean, that's going to be so sad to see that if that's actually the case. Ryan Fitzpatrick.
I don't think he'll come in. I think they'll draft someone, honestly.
I agree. Yeah, I would agree.
And will he start, that guy? I mean, unless they pick him first round, even then, probably not. But I don't know who they get for their quarterback, but yeah, it's probably going to be a veteran who's going to bridge to the rookie quarterback that you're going to draft. So I'm not even really sure who would that be, honestly. But
Hunter Henry didn't get tagged. I mean, how do you?
Yeah, I mean, he's the top tight end available right now. It doesn't seem like he's coming back to the Chargers, so if there's a team out there that would want him, I mean, I'm not really sure exactly what team that'd be, but he's definitely a top tight end. Is he going to be a game changer for you? No, but he's a good run blocker. He could catch also. In San Diego or in LA, he was kind of getting phased out a little bit with just all the weapons that they had, but whatever team gets him, they're not going to pay too much money for him, so I think that'll be a good contract for whoever gets him.
I would like to see the Patriots. I mean, I don't know if I would like to, but I mean, it depends on the money.
It seems like you want the Patriots to get everyone.
We have a lot of room. We have a lot of cap room.
But are you ready right now though? I mean, you don't know what your quarterback situation is though.
Well, the problem, if the quarterback situation is going to be garbage regardless if we can't bring in anything. I mean, I'm not saying I want Henry and whatever, we'll just say Galladay and, whoever. But I mean, I want something from free agency. I'd like to see some splash. If we don't pick up anything, I'd be disappointed because we have the 15th pick. We're not going to see Pitts. We're not going to see Jamar Chase. We probably won't see Jalen Waddle. Maybe you see Devontae Smith. I don't think so. I don't think you're going to see him at 15. He'll probably go 8 through 12 probably. But yeah, if you're not going to see Pitts, Chase, Smith, or Waddle, I don't know that picking tight end, well, definitely tight end. And wide receiver is a value pick at 15, and I don't think the Patriots would do it. I mean, maybe they would because the Patriots haven't drafted a good wide receiver since Julian Edelman, basically. I mean,
and that wasn't even because he was a wide receiver. It was for like special teams and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, the Patriots, they did trade for Trent Brown, which I mean they just let him go last year, but if he can go back to what he was with the Patriots, and then you have a pretty sturdy left tackle. And they also didn't franchise tag Joe. Is it Thuney or Thuney? I don't know. Thuney. Yeah. So
it was a good move to not. I'm happy they didn't tag Thuney. I didn't like the Thuney tag last year either. I think grabbing Brown is good. He should be solid. I think he'll probably play right tackle. I think Wynn's probably going to be the left tackle, their first round pick from 2018. He's solid. He's not great, but he's solid. Their line, I'm not worried about the line. I mean, the line will probably be. I'm gonna assume they're gonna. I think they'll bring David Andrews back, the center. So it'll probably be. I mean, they're not gonna bring Thuney back, obviously, but their line's not gonna be. I'm not concerned about the line at all. So I think not bringing Thuney back is good. I'd like to spend money elsewhere. So.
Yeah, and that's probably it for the who was not tagged and who was tagged. But just looking at free agents who are for this upcoming season, I mean, at quarterback you have Trubisky, Jacoby Brissett, Cam Newton. You have Alex Smith, but he's probably going to retire, honestly. Andy Dalton, not great quarterbacks. I mean, again, if anything, they're kind of 1 year, 2 year guys, mostly 1 year guys, but not great options at quarterback. So teams that need a quarterback are gonna have to rather draft or
who's your favorite bridge free agent quarterback? So that is I'll throw Trubisky in there, Brissett, Newton, Dalton, Fitzpatrick, Tyrod Taylor, Jameis Winston. I mean, out of those, like who's your
like a 1 year bridge or
a 1/2 year bridge? I guess we'll say
like 1.5 kind of.
Yeah.
I'd probably go with someone younger because I feel like Dalton, a Smith, if he even comes back and plays, Newton, I feel like they're going to kind of just do a 1 year and then they're done with whatever team they are. So I'd probably say Trubisky, maybe Brissett, probably Winston, honestly. I'd probably say Trubisky and Winston are kind of those like the bridge quarterbacks that I'd want because they're still productive enough in order to you at least keep your team close. Now they're not going to lead your team to playoffs or anything like that, but they're at least good enough to keep your team close in games. And then when your next guy is ready to come up, he can just come in and start, and it's really not that big of a transition.
I don't like any of these options. Obviously,
I mean if I had to,
horrible. They're all horrible.
Yeah, if I had to like one, then it was those. Yeah.
Trubisky's horrible. Brissett, he's just bad. Newton, god awful. Smith, I mean, he's probably done anyways. Dalton is probably the best option, at least in my mind. I think he's probably better than Newton, Brissett, Trubisky, Taylor, Fitzpatrick. I prefer him over Winston as well. I don't like Winston because I don't think the maturity is really there. I don't think he's a good locker room guy, and I don't think he's good either at all. I mean, I know he's not going to throw 30 picks like he did 2 years ago, but he's probably going to throw a lot, probably 20. I mean, I don't think he's that good.
But look, I mean, you're not looking for these guys to be Pro Bowlers, though.
I think I would potentially argue it's worth it. Let's say they draft. I mean, let's just say the Patriots draft Mac Jones at 15. We'll just say that. I would rather just start Mac Jones from day one than the bridge.
But the Patriots wouldn't do that though. So
why not?
Well, one, I just don't think that's kind of like I just don't think that's their formula to begin with. And it's also Mac Jones, who most people really don't think he's NFL ready. Like, he definitely needs to sit behind someone or at least learn more in order to start week one. So I don't even think any team that would draft Mac Jones, unless they really just had no other option, would start in week one.
That's what I thought about Herbert.
Well, I mean, they had Tyrod Taylor, and Anthony Lynn was adamant that he was going to be the starter. I think some people thought he could start in Herbert, but I think it was going to be that he'd sit halfway through the season and then come in. I don't think it was the full season that he'd sit. I think it was halfway, then he'd come in.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with starting. I mean, name your quarterback, whether maybe they trade up for Lance. I mean, we'll see who it is, but even just regardless of whether or not they're quote-unquote NFL ready or not, I don't even see the point in what's the point in me bringing in Newton for another year? I would rather just, I mean, if I'm going to bring him for training camp and, at most a few games, maybe a half a year at most starting Newton, sure. But I just don't see the point in doing a full year of Newton or a full year of Dalton. I would rather just rip the Band-Aid off. Mac Jones, get in there. We'll see what we have in a year. And if he doesn't work out, then, you get ready to draft another guy the next year. It's so the Patriots fumbled the bag on the quarterback. I mean, Garoppolo was the perfect pick for the time. He was going to be there for a few years. He was going to sit behind Brady. They were going to win a Super Bowl, maybe 2. And then after that, you were going to trade Brady for a first-round pick. And then you were going to have Garoppolo for the next 10 years. And it ultimately obviously didn't work out. Brady basically out-aged the draft pick. So the Garoppolo pick was a couple years too early. But they never followed up Garoppolo with another solid draft pick. I mean, Stidham was kind of that, but even then he was a little bit too late. Obviously, he was a 4th-round pick, so he wasn't even, that's not really high enough. He wasn't good at all. I mean, he's not good. They fumbled the bag on the quarterback, and I don't want to have somebody sit and marinate on the bench to get ready for 2 years and have, basically just a throwaway quarterback there for 2 years. It just doesn't make sense to me. If you had Brady there, it would make sense because at least you have a solid, great Super Bowl caliber quarterback there while you have Mac Jones marinating on the bench. But if you just have somebody there to basically quote-unquote mentor Mac Jones / Trey Lance or whoever it is, I just don't like it. I would rather just rip the Band-Aid off and, if he ultimately is the guy, maybe even if he doesn't work out the first year, you at least realize you have something there. If not, you're ready to move on.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess we'll just have to see what they do. But, I mean, look, I think they'll go bridge quarterback, but we'll have to see. But moving on from quarterbacks.
It's going to be it'll be a bad move if they do. And this is Belichick, the GM, he clearly hasn't been good enough for me to do the trust in Belichick thing that people have done. And I think in the past, yeah, it made sense. And I will trust in Bill, the head coach. Bill, the GM, has been horrible. He hasn't drafted a Pro Bowler again since Jamie Collins. So At least, yeah, he hasn't drafted a Pro Bowler since Jamie Collins, and the drafting has been horrible. The free agency, other than basically, I mean, Gilmore. Other than Gilmore, if you want to call Revis's 1 year contract, I mean, sure, but basically, other than that, he's been horrible. I mean, look at the free agency signings; they've been bad, and he hasn't been able to draft a wide receiver at all. I don't have much faith in Bill to be able to do it, and I'd rather be able to just find out in a year if Mac Jones is the guy rather than bet that he's going to be the guy in 2 years, and if he's not, then you actually just wasted 2 years. Like, you just threw him in the toilet. I mean, I don't know, but
All right, moving on from the Patriots because we talked for way too long about them. But running backs, Chris Carson didn't get tagged. We didn't mention him. James Conner, Kenyon Drake. I mean, Chris Carson's not a bad running back, but I don't know. He's not top 10. He's probably top 15. Maybe on the right team he could be better, but James Conner also, I mean, you think he'd be better, but he's just not. He's not that good of a running back. So I don't know what's going to happen with him. I assume he probably just goes back to the Steelers, honestly. But again, not great running backs. Obviously, Aaron Jones is on there, but we talked about him before. So other than Aaron Jones, I don't really like any of the other running backs. So, I mean, do you have an opinion on the running backs that are left?
at some point we're gonna have to the league. I don't know if it's this year or in the future, but at some point the default price of running backs has to fall because I don't think Jones is worth bringing in. Carson's not worth bringing in. Connor's not even worth bringing in regardless. He's horrible. He's probably not even a top 30 running back in the league. Kenyon Drake, I mean, Phillip Lindsay. I'm not going to pay these guys anything. And if Fournette even gets like more than a few million, I would be surprised. And whoever does that would be stupid, and their GM should probably be fired after a year or two. What's the point in paying these running backs any money? I just don't see it. I really don't. I mean, if Jones gives you top 10 running back production, the only way, it's not worth top 10 running back money, even if he is a top 10 running back. I would probably pay him top 20. I'd pay him like $5 million a year.
Well, that's not how it works, but yeah.
No,
I think everyone would love to do that.
No, but I'm saying that's probably the most I would pay him.
Yeah, but again, that's just obviously he's going to get a much bigger contract than that.
Well, sure, but whoever does it is going to regret it after like a year.
Off
the bat.
Yeah, and look, it's almost always the case with like a running back free agent. Someone's going to pay him a lot of money, and they're almost always going to regret it. But there's never, no matter how long football goes on for the rest of eternity, there's never going to be a time where like a top running back will never get, a $10+ million a year, let's just say, or whatever. When the money keeps going up and up, it'll probably be more than that. But no matter how replaceable a running back is, and everyone knows it, a team is always going to pay for a running back, and I never see that not happening ever in the rest of football for as long as it goes on.
Eventually, these GMs are getting paid for a reason. Eventually, don't you have to look at Zeke, McCaffrey, even, when you look at the draft picks and you look at Barkley, who you spent the second overall pick on, and you're not paying him anything right now, but you paid him the second overall pick basically, or that's what you paid to get him, and none of this is working out. It's just the running backs don't work out. And even if you look at Henry, who's probably the example of maybe when it does work out, his play style and, basically having him carry that Titans team to a championship, you see that he can't, even if he gets the 5th most rushing yards in the league. It's just, running backs, are they worth that much money? And I'm not, obviously somebody has to be the 5th highest paid running back in the league, but at what point are we going to say, the highest paid running back in the league should probably get 11 or 12 mil. That's what they probably should get at most. And that the average running back shouldn't be paid more than 6 or 7 mil. I'm at that point, if that.
Yeah, and it probably should be like that, but it's too much of a gamble for a team to do that, in that not even just not paying them, but having a guy on your team or top running back, then he has to sit out, then you have to worry about all that, then you have to worry about, you have to trade him, cut him, sign him to that contract. So I know what you're saying, and I do agree with it, but it's just never going to happen, and it probably is worse for every single team that they're going to have to go through this with every single running back that they get that turns into a top 10 running back, but that's just always going to happen, and it's definitely a problem. And we'll have to see how they fix it. They probably can't, because you can't say we're not going to pay you enough. Like, you can't just put that in a CBA or something like that. So,
well, what do you mean? It's just how the market. I mean, it'll just be the market will just adjust. The market will be, after these contracts. I mean, we're going to see with Jones, I think, or I hope at least, is that he's going to try to test the market, and he's going to see, wow, okay, so because of all these contracts and all these bad draft picks, teams don't want to spend running back money anymore. They don't want to spend big running back money anymore.
But when we're back,
they'd rather spend it on a Chris Godwin or a Kenny Galladay or a Allen Robinson or.
But when we're back in normal year and there actually is a top running back, because Aaron Jones, again, he's top 10, but he's not top 5. When there actually is a top running back that comes up, or when Saquon comes up, rather the Giants are going to pay him a lot of money and they're going to regret it, or another team is if they franchise him and then they just let him go after 2 more years or something like that. But it's for the top running backs, the market is not going to go down, even if you know that the people who have signed before that have been bad contracts and haven't worked out. They're always going to get paid. That's just how it works. You could tell a GM, don't pay for this guy, but he's still going to do it because you just have to. That's just the way it is.
I mean, yeah, that's how it works right now. I'm just saying,
Again, and I agree with what you're saying. I'm just saying that no matter for the next 40 years, it's still going to be like that. It just is. That's just how it is.
I don't think that's how it's going to be. I mean, I think after a few years, and I think we're midway through that process of people starting to realize that running backs just aren't that valuable, and maybe depending on how the running backs in the receiving game end up turning out, if that develops more and more, then maybe you can justify paying running backs more and more money. But just speaking off a running back's running ability, they're just not worth much money. A running back's running ability just isn't worth that much. The receiving aspect of a running back is more important to me than the running aspect. Obviously, technically the running aspect is more important, but considering that, a running back from like a D3 college can run at a fine level, then whatever. Like, that's just how it is. I don't know.
Moving on to wide receivers, though, the big ones. Robinson would have been one, Godwin would have been one, but they both got tagged. We talked about Galladay, Juju Smith-Schuster's there, Corey Davis, Curtis Samuel. I actually really like Curtis Samuel, but I think whatever team gets him is going to be really good for them. But again, Galladay I think is a top 10 wide receiver. Juju, he's probably going back to the Steelers, but any team that overpays for him, they're definitely going to regret that. He's not that good. Corey Davis, I think he has a lot of talent. I think he's in a bad situation, and if he could stay healthy and be on a team with just a better overall offense, I think he'd be really good. Yeah, Corey Davis. I think he's a really good wide receiver. I think he was just in a bad situation.
Where would you have? I mean, how good do you think Tannehill is?
Well, again, we've talked about it. They're a running team that prides themselves from running the ball, and they're a play-action team. The Titans are with Henry, obviously. So. And it's not even so much Tannehill not being a good quarterback. I just think he needs to be in a new offense that doesn't just pride itself on only running the ball and really throwing it on play action, or maybe like a 1st and 10 where you can fake him with a run. So I just think that if he goes to a new team, maybe he has a better weapon at wide receiver. I know they had A.J. Brown, but he was also injured a little bit last year. So I just think that with a team with like a true number 1 and a offense that spreads the ball out, I think he'd just be a lot better.
I mean, I just don't really agree. I think Corey Davis is going to see some of the best coverages out of any receivers in the league. I mean, in the playoffs, when the Ravens have the opportunity and they want to put 8 or 9 in the box, you're just not going to see double coverage that much if you're Corey Davis, especially because he was the second best receiver on that team, assuming A.J. Brown is healthy. He's not going to see better coverages somewhere else than he would in Tennessee. And I'm not a Tannehill guy, but Tannehill can at least make the throws that he needs to in a running play action offense. I don't see the talent. I mean, I see the potential there for Corey Davis, but I think it just hasn't worked out. I mean, he's obviously a big guy who can run, but if I'm a team, I'm staying away from Davis. I'm probably staying away from Schuster as well. I mean, he just hasn't. I think he was a lot better when he had somebody like AB taking all the attention away, and he was able to get, I mean, not necessarily single coverages, but teams just weren't concerned about him. I mean, now we've seen in Pittsburgh, obviously they still have a bunch of good receivers, but they're all kind of they're pretty equal. I would stay away from Schuster as well because Schuster's probably going to get 4 years, 65, and I'm not paying that. Curtis Samuel, I'm not too familiar with Samuel. I just haven't watched him as much as I've watched Davis or Smith Schuster. So I'm not too sure. I'd have to do more, film study. But I off the bat, at least right now, from what I've seen from Samuel, I would rather sign Samuel than Davis or Schuster. Will Fuller's another free agent as well. I'm not a big fan of Will Fuller either. I think he gets super injury prone. He is super injury prone. I think he's just not that good. I mean, he's a great deep threat, but other than that, I just don't think he has too much to his game. I'm not going to pay him anything more than wide receiver 2 money, and even then, I'd be super scared to pay him wide receiver 2 money, at least on a multi-year deal. So,
yeah, and again, I think we probably disagree with Corey Davis, but if I was a team, I'd probably sign him again. He's going to be pretty cheap to sign, so I think that would be a really good contract for whatever team does it. But kind of going to some other just big free agents. Looking at offensive line, there's Trent Williams, Eric Fisher, even though he did tear his Achilles, so he's most likely probably out for the whole season. If anything, at least half the season, but I expect to be the full season. Mitchell Schwartz, again, those are the 2 tackles in Fisher and Schwartz who were cut by the Chiefs today. He may retire. He has a back injury, so I think that's kind of also the reason they cut him, was because he's injured and he may retire. But if he doesn't, he's a really good player. And then guard-wise, we talked about Joe Tooney. Kevin Zeitler got released by the Giants. Gabe Jackson by the Raiders. So those guys are pretty good guards. We'll have to see what the market looks like for them. And then at center, I'd say the top center, Corey Linsley. He was an All-Pro last year by the Packers. I'd assume they'd bring him back, but I guess we'll have to see. I would expect with Rodgers still being there and obviously getting older, you'd want to keep that offensive line intact. So I expect him to go back to the Packers, but he is, as seen last year as being an All-Pro, he's clearly one of the top centers in the league. So there's a couple good offensive linemen who are out there, but we'll just have to see what the market looks like for them.
As far as Linsley is concerned, the center position in general, it's the least important position on the line. I think guards are more important nowadays, especially because they're running so much more than they typically would in older offenses. So I think the center is the least valuable offensive line position. I don't know if it's worth paying Linsley top money if you're just looking at the pool of centers and I guess the draft in general. Would you rather pay a guy like David Andrews? We'll see what Alex Mack commands on the market. I would assume it's going to be less than Linsley by at least a little bit. Would you rather pay a Mack or an Andrews, or would you rather just see if you can find a solid center in the third, fourth, fifth round? You did it with Linsley. Typically, centers just aren't drafted high. They're pretty safe picks too. There's typically, at least most teams when they pick a center, they turn out to be, not horrible. I just don't think it's that important of a position. Obviously, Linsley's top, whatever. He's at least top 3 at his position. But again, am I going to pay him big money when I could have maybe a top guard or a top tackle? Probably. And obviously, the top tackle and top guard are probably going to get more money, but I think that's money worth paying.
Yeah, always for a center, centers usually have smaller contracts than guards and tackles, because it is the least important position on that offensive line. But you can always restructure contracts with offensive linemen. It happens every single year for every single team. So I don't think they'll have to pay like top money, but they'll have to pay a pretty good amount to bring him back. And again, they always restructure those contracts, especially with the Packers. They usually kind of backload contracts anyways. So I expect him to be back with the Packers, I guess is what I'm saying. But looking at the defensive side of the ball, I'll kind of just list some bigger names from the whole defensive side of the ball. You have Yannick Ngakoue, Trey Hendrickson, who had a really good year last year. You still have Jadeveon Clowney. I just think he's not good at all, so we'll see what happens, but he's not that good of a player. Looking at linebackers, again, we talked about Shaq Barrett. You have Bud Dupree, who wasn't tagged by the Steelers, coming off a torn ACL. Matt Judon from the Ravens. Hassan Reddick from the Cardinals, who was really good last year. Kyle Van Noy, who we just mentioned earlier. He got released from the Dolphins after signing a 4-year contract with them last offseason. you also have at corner, really not great corners. You have Shaquille Griffin, who's been good on the Seahawks, but I think he's kind of overhyped a little bit, maybe just by Seattle fans. But I don't think he's that good of a cornerback. He's probably a number 2, maybe number 3 on most teams. You're still Richard Sherman, Patrick Peterson, some older guys. We'll see if they go back to the teams they were on. I would say probably not. Maybe Sherman does.
Definitely not. Sherman said he was done. Sherman's done. He's not. I mean, not
With the
done.
Niners?
Yeah, he's definitely done.
I'm pretty sure Peterson said he was done with the Cardinals too. I didn't know about Sherman though, so I guess they'll both be on different teams though.
Maybe things change, but yeah, from what I've researched, it looks like he's definitely done.
Yeah, and then safety wise, again, we mentioned Justin Simmons got tagged, Marcus May got tagged, Marcus Williams of the Saints got tagged. He's a decent safety, but yeah, really, other than those guys on the defensive side, there's maybe a couple other people that are somewhat noteworthy, but those are really the bigger guys on the defensive side of the ball. So not great free agents, maybe a couple really good ones, but no one who's like a spectacular free agent that's like the must get on the defensive side of the ball.
I mean, if you're a team that needs defense, especially, I mean, in the corner and the safety market, we'll have to see what happens. I mean, because of there just not being many great cornerbacks, is a Sherman, a Peterson, a Malcolm Butler, people like that, are they going to get overpaid? I don't think so. So that leads me to think that, if you need a veteran guy at that position or just in general, why not take a chance on a Sherman? Why not take a flyer on Peterson, a flyer on Butler, maybe a flyer on like Jason Verrett or Xavier Rhodes or something like that? I mean, why not maybe even like Boye? I mean, why not just take flyers on these guys? Maybe one of them out of those 5 or 6 guys, I would assume one or two of them works out to be solid contracts, at least, maybe not multi-year, but for 1 year. I would, if I need a corner, I would consider signing one of those. And safeties is kind of the same way. I mean, see how much Keanu O'Neal goes for, Kenny Vaccaro. I mean, they're not going to be expensive at all, and they're probably going to be, if you're signing Vaccaro, he's probably on a 1-year prove-it deal, 1 year, low money. And he's trying to earn maybe another payday before he's done in the league. Probably not, but I mean, take a flyer on these guys, see what you get out of them. Are they anything? Maybe you cut them in camp and you lose absolutely nothing. Most you lose is $500,000. I mean, if you even have to pay that and guaranteed. So
yeah, so we'll have to see what happens. There's some good names out there that are free agents. There will be a lot of people in trade negotiations, most likely. It seems like there will be a couple quarterbacks. Allen Robinson, most likely, unless he gets like cut or something like that, or whatever happens with the franchise whole thing in the summer. And offensive linemen also, there's some movement. There was just quickly, there was potential talks with Orlando Brown of the Ravens, who's turned into be one of the top offensive tackles in the league. He wants to play left tackle, but he's playing right tackle right now. Obviously, you get paid way more being a left tackle. So we'll have to see what happens with him. There's a couple other situations like that too, but it's going to be a pretty good offseason. It already has been so far. It's only been a couple days, and we still have another month and a half till the draft. So we'll have to see what happens with that. So yeah, I would say the next 2 weeks it's going to be pretty busy with a lot of free agent signings.
The question with Brown, he probably about a month ago at this point, he tweeted out that he's a left tackle. I would assume the Ravens, they just signed Stanley to the extension. I assume they're going to stick with Stanley, so which means they're going to have to trade Brown.
Yeah.
I think the Chiefs are the name that comes to my head at the very first team. Obviously, they just released Schwartz and Fisher. Maybe they just trade 31 for Brown. I don't think I've seen that. I don't think that's a bad trade. Maybe you can get away with a little bit less than 31. But yeah, if I'm the Chiefs, I'm looking to trade for Brown. If not, then I probably spend 31 on a tackle. I would assume at least. But yeah, I don't see. I don't think there's any way Brown comes back to the Ravens, at least off the top of my head.
Yeah, because he'll never get paid like a left tackle playing right tackle. And you're right, Stanley signed that contract at the beginning of this last season, and then he got injured. But he should be back for this upcoming season. So unless he's just willing to keep playing right tackle, which it doesn't seem like he is, then he's most likely going to get traded to whatever team needs a left tackle, which is definitely multiple teams. The Chiefs, the Dolphins, they could use a left tackle. There's probably a couple other teams that could use one too. So we'll have to see how that situation plays out, but I'd say that's probably it for the free agents. Those were the big ones that we kind of went through. on offense and defense. Again, I mean, special teams, there's really no one, not like it matters. But, yeah, I would say that's the beginning of the free agent process that we just went through. All right, so, I mean, I would say that's it. We'll be back Tuesday at 12 on WQAQ 98.1 radio station, also on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. So, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, everything's in the description. So we'll be back, Tuesday at noon.